So we're going to spend about an hour on soups. I'm going to make 2 soups here today and go over a bunch of tips and tricks and how you can use these strategies in your own kitchen. So if you do pull up your handout, whether you click on the link in the chat that's there at the top now, or you can find it in the event calendar invite, the PDF was attached there. Go ahead and pull that up so we can kind of go through it together. We have some tips here, but first I kind of want to go through just why we decided to highlight soup. And it's one of those where if you think about it at a restaurant, you might be envisioning like a French onion or a broccoli cheese that, you know, is really heavy on the saturated fat, high in sodium, right? When we buy it at the store, it could be really low in vegetables and again, high in sodium, but they don't have to be that way and they really are easy to make at home. So, you know, hopefully we can build your confidence with that. When it comes to soup too, they're very flexible. So it's easy to kind of add beans, legumes, whole grains, and experiment with a lot of different vegetables. And we're going to go through a lot of strategies today. I like making my own too, just because I can use those leftover proteins. So the Real class, Real Nutrition kicked off yesterday, and through that series we talk often about, you know, make sure you're utilizing your proteins for multiple things. So if I wanted a chicken and rice soup, I have everything in the pantry. All I need to do is make 1 extra chicken breast, and I can do that 2 days later. So it's very, you know, adaptable to your kitchen environment. And then lastly, you know, when again referencing Real Nutrition, but we often talk about, you know, let's aim to make our plate half vegetables, 1/4 carbohydrate, and 1/4 protein. And soups are really adaptable to that philosophy as well. If you see a recipe that doesn't have a lot of vegetables, you can usually increase it. You can swap out, you know, if it calls for white rice, you could add quinoa, brown rice, or even a can of beans if you want to get that fiber up. So like I said, it's very flexible, and then they're also just kind of warming and kind of that hearty kind of comfort food that helps us get through the winter. So some tips that we're going to go through today. Most soups, many soups, start with what's called, and I'm probably going to say it wrong, I don't know if Caroline Fisher's on here, she's French, but it's called mirepoix, I think. But it's a blend of celery, carrots, and onions. And I actually prepped.
You said it correctly.
Thank you. Good. Thanks for confirming. So this is kind of the blend here, celery, carrots, and onion that I cut up, you know, prior to class starting. Since we are making 2 soups, you don't need to see me chop things twice. But this is something that I'll occasionally freeze. The texture is a little bit different, but the convenience kind of outweighs what I give up there. I also buy it at Trader Joe's, already cut up like this. It comes in a kind of 3-cup 4-cup maybe plastic container in their produce section. So there are a lot of nice ways that you can kind of start the soup base. And this is crucial to flavor. You're gonna kind of saute it in your olive oil, which you're gonna see in a minute here. And it's kind of one of those things where if a soup skips this, it just is missing something. It might be kind of a thin taste or a light or kind of a shallow flavor, I would say. So this one is going to be crucial, making that mirepoix. So another tip to enhance your soups, you want to learn a little bit about aromatics. So I go over them here today. We are using garlic, onion. Another one of my favorite aromatics is a leek, which we are not going over today. Leeks are wonderful. They have a light kind of oniony flavor, but they're also a great prebiotic. So you're not only enhancing the flavor of your soup using those aromatic qualities from that vegetable, but you're also adding, you know, a bit that's going to support your gut. These aromatics, when they are sauteed with a fat, usually olive oil, or some soups will call for a little bit of butter, but that fat is going to help that vegetable release flavor compounds. So just like a lot of people are into essential oils, cumin has essential oils, your scallions do, you know, so there's a list here. We've got chilies, ginger, parsnips, which are those kind of white looking, they're like carrots but white, scallions, shallots. So, you know, if you want more flavor, make sure you kind of look into aromatics. Third here, while fresh herbs are wonderful, I'm actually not using any today. They're often pricey or out of season, so you obviously can use them, but oftentimes it's a little easier to use dried. So I'm just going to highlight two today. One is called Herbe de Provence. And I'm lucky enough to have a neighbor from France. So when she goes, she brings me back this French Herbe de Provence blend, which, as you can see, is sadly almost gone. But there is an American equivalent. Where is it? This is the only one that I've found that's not at Penzeys, which is a local store to Grand Rapids. I don't know if everybody's from Grand Rapids, but it's called Herbe de Provence. This is going to be kind of a good substitute. Like today, the soup calls for fresh thyme. I'm just going to use Herbe de Provence, and it turns out great. Another one is if a soup calls for fresh oregano or basil, you can use an Italian dried blend. So yeah, rely on your spice cupboard. Next point here is using pre-cooked proteins and whole grains can really speed you up. So today I already pre-cooked the chicken for the chicken. That's one where I'll have diced chicken frozen in the freezer as well as frozen brown rice. And I'll actually just pull those out. You can dump them from frozen right into your pan and they thaw while you're cooking the soup. You're still going to focus on the aromatics, the spices, the herbs, but you're able to kind of adapt quickly on an evening weeknight and make a soup in 15-20 minutes, which is great. Another point here, yes, to thicken soups, we are going to, I'm using flour in mine today. You know, I don't have an issue with gluten. If you do have an issue with gluten, a tip to thicken your soup is to blend some white beans with the liquid from the can of beans. Blend that up with a little food processor and use that kind of paste that you make to thicken the soup. That's a strategy that is kind of tried and true, where if something calls for heavy cream and you either want something lower fat or you want to avoid gluten or dairy. Oh, thanks, Jonathan. If you want to avoid gluten or dairy, you can do the white bean kind of slurry, is what it's called. Or you can do almond flour or chickpea flour mixed with some almond milk. So I'm using the almond milk today. I'll show you how to do that. Then lastly, I just wanted to throw some ideas. If you feel like your soup is missing something at the end, a lot of us are used to salting it to get more flavor. But this last section here goes over plenty of ideas for you that don't rely on salt to get more flavor. One is a shot of tomato paste. I should have grabbed this out. Let me grab the one that I use. So I like these concentrated tomato paste. Not only is it 2 times concentrated, so you don't need as much. It's really dark red, but you also can keep it in your fridge. It's not like the little cans that you use a tablespoon of that can and then what do you do with it? So these tubes are nice. They're found in every grocery store, you know, pasta sauce aisle. So that might be a good thing to keep on hand. But like if you made a minestrone and it just tastes thin, adding that a little at the end kind of gives it a little more depth. You can also do a shot of vinegar, which sounds a little funny, but we're going to use lemon juice today in the lentil soup, but you could do vinegar. It just kind of brightens the flavor a bit. The same is true for vinegar with your grainy salads. Try to match the depth of the flavor to, oh, thank you. Yeah, freezing that. That's a good idea. You can also match the depth of the flavor and color of your soup to the vinegar. So if you have something that's more beef-based, that's darker, you might use balsamic. But if it's a lighter soup and red, like a tomato, you might do or like a red wine vinegar. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just using a tablespoon, but it does brighten the flavor up quite a bit. And like I said, today we're adding lemon juice to a spicy soup. And then you can also top your soups with, yes, citrus. That's a great point. Pesto. I'll add harissa, which is kind of a chili paste to some of mine, or even hummus. If you have a little hummus, you can put that on the top of your soup. So we're kind of used to shredded cheese, salt, and sour cream, but try to kind of branch out and see what you can do with these other flavors that can enhance the flavor of your soup. Okay, cool. So those are the initial tips. We're going to go over more as we start. I can't fix the challenge of the noise of my sauteing vegetables over my voice, so I'll try to keep speaking. If it gets too loud, I'll put the lid on, but I'm hoping you can continue to hear me because sauteing stuff is loud, as you know. Okay, so we're gonna get started with the lentil soup, which is on page 2. The first recipe you have is the pureed vegetable soup. This is a favorite of mine that is more like a formula than a recipe. Because I see Andy is on here, my boss. I can be very particular, but I'm pretty flexible when it comes to cooking. So I like to have these formulas that I can change the flavor of on the fly. So if I've got this vegetable pureed soup recipe, I might last minute decide to do the carrot cashew curry, or you can do the broccoli or the fall harvest, you know, kind of on the fly and decide kind of what you're feeling at the moment. So this recipe is pretty cool, very tried and true, and very adaptable. We are doing the 2 recipes on page 2 because I thought those highlighted most of the points we were going with today. And then with the white chicken chili, that's kind of a crock pot one that I'll talk on a little bit, but we're gonna get rolling with cooking these. So when you're making that mirepoix, it's really important to practice your skills when it comes to cutting onions, right? Because not only can it be messy and make you cry, but it can be a little bit daunting when it comes to cutting an onion. But I'm going to show you kind of that proper way to cut. Try to face the camera here. So I'm doing a whole onion in this. I'm talking, so I better put my heat down there. So I'm going to take off not the root end, but this papery end. Going to just kind of slice that off first, and then next I'm going to make sure I breach this cut so that I get some corners. Okay. So I'm going to chop that, and I usually go ahead and use these, but I'm not going to today for time's sake. So you can see here, right now you've got these corners. Now you can easily pull that paper back. I'm going to do it over the trash so I don't get stuff everywhere, but try to keep that paper attached to the root. So hang on. Well, I got a full layer that came with it, but if I had more paper on there, it would be like a handle almost. So I'll probably just peel it off. Either way, sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't, but you want to keep that root intact. So to get diced onion pretty quickly, you're going to have a flat surface, take your knife parallel to that board and kind of slide it through your onion, but don't go all the way through to the root. So that's your first step, is you made 3 or 2, I did 2. If you have a bigger onion, you might do 3. 2 slices that way. Then turn your knife and go kind of, I guess, perpendicular then to the board. And I'm going small because I like my onion chopped small. If you don't care, you can cut it a bit bigger. But again, we have not kind of breached the root. So you can see the fanning it out there. It's not helping that I'm showing you all. Okay, so kind of pack it back together, and then you're basically going to shave your diced onion right off the end here. And that is, if I'm not talking, the quickest way to get through an onion. So once you get toward the end here, be careful not to slip, but you've got this left. I kind of just rock my knife around the side of this just to use all of it. Careful not to get any paper in there, which I think I did, but that's okay. All right, let me get these out of here. So I've had my pan preheating, and this typically is always your first step to soup, is you're starting with these aromatics. Okay, so I'm going to start the onion. I've got my olive oil somewhere. This calls for a little bit extra olive oil on this lentil soup. It's 3 tablespoons. That is a little bit more. It helps make the soup really creamy. You could do a little less if you want. It's as long as it doesn't stick, it's not gonna hurt. All right, so get my onion going, and then I'll go with the carrots. This is when it's gonna get a little loud. Okay, so next we've got the carrots. I'm already making a mess, which I tend to be a messy cook, and it's worse when I'm teaching a class. So I never peel carrots. I wash them. If anybody, wonders about, pesticides on vegetables, washing with water and scrubbing it, getting some friction going, that is what's recommended. You don't need to do like a vinegar rinse or anything. If you don't want, research shows that running water and some friction does the trick. So I don't mind the carrots not peeled, but if you want to, go right ahead. I'm going to take the kind of tip off the carrot. Gotta look at these chat things here real quick. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay, so Jonathan, it's olive oil. Olive oil and onion right now. So that's getting the lentil soup started. You can, some soups will call for butter. If I'm making a curry, like a coconut curry, I'll probably use coconut oil. But, we'll pretty much, yeah, I usually start with olive oil on that one. So cut the root end off. With your carrots, it's really up to you as far as how big you want the pieces to be. I like to cut the longer carrots in half this way and then in half this way. So I can not only get a flat surface, but the pieces are going to be just a little bit smaller. And this carrot's so big, I might even do another one. So use your judgment. All right, so I've got all these on flat surfaces. Like I said, these ones are a little big. They're over an inch, so I might just give those some, get the quartered version of those. All right, so I'm gonna just notice I'm keeping, with chopping this, I'm keeping that tip down on the cutting board, and then I'm also holding the blade, right? So you'll even see pictures when I'm making handouts. I always refuse to put a picture where somebody's cutting like this. Not only does that strain your hand, but you're not as, you don't have as much muscle control or strength with that. So bend your finger around, wrap the blade. Ideally, your knife is rounded here. The knife I used for probably 10 years was not rounded, and I was getting blisters there when I would do my food prep because it was pretty sharp. But this one is nice and rounded, which I love. So that's a couple tips on knife skills. That does make this go faster. And this is where you can add your leek. You can add celery if you wanted. You could add extra carrots or parsnips. The only thing you need to do possibly is adjust the liquid, which again, soups are very forgiving. If it ends up too thick, just add more liquid at the end. So I always err on the side of too little when it comes to the broth and water, especially if I'm adding extra. So I think this said 2 carrots, but mine were pretty large. So anyway, tossing these in and get those going. I wish I had a camera crew here. I'll lift my camera up in a bit. But I am cooking in this Dutch oven. It's an enameled Dutch oven. And actually my last one just went kaput, but my dad got it for me probably 15 years ago from Aldi. So that was always the running joke, is how long my Aldi pan was going to last, and it really was kicking for a long time. But rather than get it reglazed, this is where we went. So this is, yes, a Dutch oven. It's very heavy bottomed, but I also will cook this other soup. It's a quicker cooking soup in just a big pot pan. So use either one. All right, next we're going through the garlic. So I'm sure some of you that have done some of these classes have seen this, and I apologize, but I can't not go over my favorite kitchen tool. So this is a garlic peeler. I don't have a lot of fancy schmancy tools, but this is one that I use almost daily. So you have your unpeeled garlic clove. If you wanted to just mince it, you could smash, right? I guess I'll go ahead and do that real quick. You take the side of your knife, you lay it on your clove and smash. That lets you peel the paper off really easily, supposedly. Yeah, that one has a big root. So I've got a peeled garlic clove. This garlic clove is smashed though, so I'm not going to be able to grate it on this microplane. So that's what the peeler is for. This peeler, you pop the whole clove in, you kind of move that around. This is brand new garlic, so it's a little, the paper's a little tight. There we go. So this silicone tube pulls the paper right off. So the clove is not smashed, and you can use this microplane or rasp to grate your garlic into a paste. So this red garlic peeler is from that Sur La Table, which I heard was closing, I think this Friday in Grand Rapids. But I've seen them on Amazon. I've seen them at Bed Bath & Beyond. They're like $5 to $6. But look at how cool that is. It grates it all into this paste. And garlic is one of those foods that benefits from oxygen. It activates some of those antioxidant chemicals that are there. So this is really kind of exposing all of your garlic to oxygen. So you're getting that max health benefit. I actually like it the most because my garlic never touches my cutting board because of this. And if anybody has had a garlic kind of infested cutting board, it's quite annoying. So that's why I like it. I'm going to kind of put this in the pan, just kind of whack it just like that. This calls for 4 cloves of garlic. That's a lot for me. So I'm going to, I'm going to only add 2 because they're pretty big. What's the question here? These are just coming up. Oh, here we go. Now I've got the thing. Okay, cool. So difference between the microplane and the garlic press. Not much with the result. It's more, for me, irritation factor, if you will. So a press, you know, you would put the garlic in here. I'll actually do it with this. So you put the garlic in. This is a garlic press. And squeeze that down. So you can see the end result's the same, but you, like this, I just could whack it on the side of the pan and it's in there. This, I always have to take another knife and kind of push it out of there. And then I'm left with all of this fibrous, you can see, stuffs in there that I have to dig out with another knife. After I discovered this, I love garlic, and I cook with it a lot. So that's one that I don't like to dig out, 5 different, garlic stuffs. I don't even know what to call it. It's like the fiber or something. So that's why I like the microplane. And that's what this tool is. This is a microplane and this is a silicone garlic peeler. Yeah, I'm glad you can see stuff. Thanks, Deborah. Okay, so I'm going to get this cleaned up since I talked too much and kept it messy. All right, so stirring that garlic in. I've got 2 cloves in there, I believe. All right, so next, and this is a tactic that you can take from soups to skillet dishes and even like your grainy salads. We're gonna add the spices when it's just the oil and the vegetables in the pan, because heat will, like I said before, will release some of the essential oils in these spices. So if anybody's made like a shakshuka does this, a lot of Indian cooking, that kind of thing. I usually don't measure spices, but I guess I will today. So we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of cumin. I guess this is new. I go through a lot of cumin. Oh yeah, I used it up in the last cooking class, I think. So we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of cumin right into the pan. I'm putting it on top of the vegetables, not directly onto the bottom of the pan, because I don't want it to singe or scald. So while I'm measuring, and this is a curry, so I'm gonna do 1 tablespoon of curry. And then once I can stir it up, then we won't have to worry about it kind of singeing, because if I put it on the bottom of the pan, it would just be sitting there right now. And then this calls for dried thyme. Again, I always just use the Herb de Provence. It's never failed me, but you can buy all the separate ones too. This has thyme, marjoram. This one has basil. Usually there's lavender and American Herb de Provence, which I'm told was incorrect. But this one is really good. Yeah, so it's very floral and like these woody spices. You can see that. So just gonna add those and then get this stirring a little bit. And I got the heat lower than I normally would, just FYI, just to slow it down a little bit. So I have time to talk. So this is when it's just everything is fragrant, right? So you're really smelling those spices. all of that. So from here, we're just going to add the liquid and the lentils. And so that's as easy as that is. If I wasn't talking, this would have taken 7-8 minutes. I've got these stewed tomatoes. They are not very chopped up, so I'll end up probably using kitchen shears and cutting them up. It's just the can that I had, so I'm using it. I partially drained it just to take some of that liquid out because I didn't want it to be too kind of too thin at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. Stir that up, and then this is where we add the water, broth, and the lentils, and then we'll partially cover it and let the lentils do their thing. So I'm using the chicken broth today. I know this says vegetable. In my world, those are interchangeable. If you want it to be vegetarian, definitely use vegetable. What is not interchangeable is beef broth. It's not going to be the same, but chicken and vegetable broth typically taste the same. These boxes are 4 cups. So this calls for 4 cups of broth. So that'll be easy just to kind of dump in. You can make your own broth if you want to go all out. If you ever have, you know, leftover like those onion ends, you know, celery, carrots, garlic peels, you can boil those and drain it out. That is not something that happens in my world at this point. I have done it once. You can add herbs and all that, lemon. So I'm using the box. So this broth I bought from Costco because I make soups quite a lot. So I go through them. I also use it for you know, skillet 1-pot dishes and cooking whole grains. So this one's from Costco. I knew somebody was going to ask that about stock and broth. I've never noticed a difference. I use them interchangeably. I'm sure a chef would cringe at me saying that, but I use them interchangeably. As far as what brand, just watch your sodium, right? So I like this one. It is a little bit high, and this one is a little bit higher in sodium actually, but it comes in bulk. And so that's one of my, you know, we're always weighing our decisions. So they do have no salt options. I try to buy organic when I can. But yeah, probably the sodium and then the flavor that you like are the 2 biggest things. And then, yeah, if anybody else knows stock versus broth, that's one that I think my aunt has even called me about that before. And I was like, I don't know. I use them both. So if anybody wants to chime in on that, please feel free.
Stock is usually created from the with vegetables and the bones. Okay,
Yeah.
broth includes the meat as well as the vegetables and the bones.
Interesting. So that's what they boil, and then do they strain it out still with the broth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, you know, you would skim off any fat that, you know, had accumulated as well. But
Sure.
a broth is supposed to be richer. Okay, a stock is pretty basic.
So maybe higher fat, yeah. Because I usually do use stock. So that's what my Croatian grandfather was making when I would come over and see him skimming fat off of a top. Yeah, thank you, Joseph.
You bet.
Awesome. Okay, so from here we're going to add a little bit of water, which I forgot to set out my 1-cup measure. I'm using every measuring cup, so my 2-cup is occupied. All right, I'm going scant on the water. I just want to make sure I like thicker soups that almost verge on a stew. So that is basically it. We're going to let that go for the rest of the time, 25 minutes. So I'll be able to show you at the end. We are going to just wilt in some greens and hit it with some lemon juice. But this is hands off now. So I'm probably going to take, oh no, lentils below. So I've rinsed green lentils 1 cup. They are uncooked, so I'm just going to dump those in. Rinsing them just kind of gets rid of any of that dust that they have when they process. I don't always rinse them. All right. That wouldn't have thickened up very much if we didn't add lentils. So, all right, so I'm going to partially cover that so you can see this is kind of floating off, let some steam escape and all of that. And we are going to do the next one. So give me a moment while I switch these pots. I think I need... So the one we're using is closer to me. I don't dare reach over. It's It's a problem waiting to happen. All right. Okay, good question on the taste difference between green, red, and yellow lentils. It's more of a texture difference than it is a taste difference, though I do think the green is a little bit more earthy, if you will, with the lentil taste. The yellow and red tend to be a little lighter, but the biggest difference is the texture. The red and yellow are softer. So like I have a cookbook that's all about beans. I think it's called Don't Spill the Beans or something, but it's been a wonderful cookbook to get me used to whole grains and beans. But that one, if they do any kind of baking with lentils, they always use the red because it's a little bit softer. The green tends to be a little more hearty, like it holds its shape a little bit better. So that is what I know of those differences, and I always just buy green too. So okay, next up, we're going to do this veggie loaded chicken and rice. I wanted to highlight this one not only because it's super quick, but also because it's one of those that has onion, carrot, it could have leek, has mushrooms, kale, right? And I added celery to mine just because I had it, so we're using it. But it is so loaded with vegetables. And then if you have cooked brown rice, say you're making a stir fry on a Tuesday, cook double so that you have 2 cups to make this the next night. So it is one of those carryover meals that works really well. I've also made it where I didn't feel like cooking rice. I didn't have any frozen. So I just used a can or 2 of white beans, and that works just as well without any problem. So I'm going to switch. I do need to cut some kale still, so we'll keep that over here. All right, hopefully you guys can't see my mess. All right, so this is the pre-chopped kind of mirepoix. We're going to start the heat. Well, I wanted to go, oh, well, yeah. This one really is mostly just the ease of that, but oh, this was the thickener. I wanted to do that. I'm just using 1 chicken breast. You could use 2, but I find it to be hearty enough without it. Okay, so that's going to heat up quicker than your Dutch oven because, sorry, I need my camera crew. Okay, because it's a thinner pan, right? So pay attention to when you're using cast iron or a Dutch oven like that, it takes longer to heat up, but it also takes longer to adjust. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're cooking. Just going to add, again, a little bit of olive oil. This kind of has the same start, except this one does have celery. It doesn't have it in the recipe. I always think I'm going to eat the whole stock with hummus for snacks, and I don't get through it. So that stuff happens to dietitians too. All right, let me stir this real quick. I'll get those vegetables going. I'm going to chop up my chicken, and the big thing here is kind of talking through soups. There's a couple tips that I want to go over. This chicken, I did my favorite tactic, which is just to sear it in cast iron and then put it in the oven for 20 minutes. I did some rosemary on it just because that sounded good, and this soup has some herbs in it. You can go ahead and do it plain, use grilled chicken. You could boil it and shred it if you wanted. I don't want it to be all perfect cubes, so I'm just running my knife through. All right. If you had fresh chicken, this is where you would put that in though. You would just dice your fresh chicken, raw chicken, kind of pop that in your pan, take it out, and then put your aromatics in to start that soup base. Then you put the chicken back in. So you can do it if you have just kind of cut chicken, but we are not doing that today. So this is going to take about 5 minutes here. What I'm going to kind of go over is thickening soup. So there are 2 ways to do it. Well, I'll go over the way not to do it. How we don't want to do it is putting flour of any kind into your soup without mixing it into a liquid. Okay, how am I going to say this? Because there's 2 ways to do it. If you have liquid added to your soup already, you don't want to just dump your flour in because you will never get it completely incorporated. It'll have these little chunks floating around and it just won't work out that way. The two ways to do it are, if you're going to thicken the flour before you add your liquid, you can add this directly to your pan right now, before you add any kind of broth or stock or tomato liquid or anything like that. The second option, which is what we're doing today, I've got the flour measured. I'm going to use a little almond milk and whisk it, just like you would make a gravy, and add that at the very end. The liquid's already in the pot. So I hope those two strategies are clear. This one uses the second strategy. I've really noticed that recipes, this one I could put the flour in now. It would be just fine. It would still thicken nicely. That would be no problem. I'm still just going to do it this way. So this has measures on the side of this little prep bowl. So I'm putting in about 3/4 cup. It calls for 1 cup. Yes, thank you, Joseph. It is called a slurry, and I used to that has a little or big backstory with my dad. We make fun of him for his slurries a lot. Yeah, so this is the part where you could do this with white beans if you didn't want to use flour or you needed it to make a gluten-free dish. A small baby whisk is on my kitchen list. This is kind of silly, but I'm going to get there. So you want to get all the chunks out. I mean, that's kind of the whole point, is that we have these smooth, creamy soups. So I just used, I think it's a whole wheat flour. You could use chickpea, you could do cornstarch. No, yep, that would be no problem at all. You could use almond flour, coconut flour, or white beans, or even hummus if those flavors kind of went with what you had going on. I wouldn't use hummus for this one because it's a little more herby. All right, so those veggies are going a little too hot. I don't want to forget my mushrooms. Hang on. So if I'm making an actual mushroom soup, I don't buy the pre-sliced mushrooms because to me they're too thick. I'll get the button mushrooms and put them through my food processor, and it slices them really thin. I just like that better, but this is a nice convenient way to kind of just get it done. But yeah, if you do buy whole mushrooms, you can put them through your food processor with a shredder slicer. Okay. So I need to regroup. Where are we at here? Let's talk about whole grains for soup. So I have already cooked brown rice for this. This is where, if you've ever been in a class with me, I'm sure I've mentioned to cook and freeze your whole grains. So you can do that, and if you pull your baggie out of the freezer of frozen quinoa, you could even do frozen lentils, frozen brown rice, barley, farro, you can dump those straight into your soup. So that's a really nice way to kind of prep ahead so that you have a plan when you don't have a plan. You know, that's kind of my favorite thing to talk about, is life kind of happens. So what's your meal plan when you don't have a meal plan? And this is a perfect example. I was out of my brown rice in my freezer though, so I did cook this morning, but I cooked double, stocked a couple extra baggies in the freezer while I was at it. So yeah, just make sure you look into doing that. It's, I think, a game changer in the kitchen. All right, so those mushrooms are going. I'm going to add the herbs now. I'm going to go a little heavy on them just because I like that. My bag is almost gone here. Sad. Okay, that's enough for one more soup. Okay, so mix those around because, like I said, with the spices, the heat helps kind of activate those flavors. The only thing you don't want to do this with is fresh, delicate herbs. If it's cilantro, parsley, those are added to your soup, or basil, those are added to your soup at the very, very end. You don't want to let them touch the heat like this for too long. If you have fresh thyme, rosemary, those woodier herbs, those you can add now, add in the dried. Okay, see if we're missing any questions here. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Cornstarch, we got that. Okay, yeah, rice cooker, 20 minutes on your brown rice. I use the long grain brown rice. I'll show you. So it comes in a bag like this. It's just long grain brown rice. Has a little more fiber and protein than the brown rice that's a 10-minute quick cook. Yeah, you know, it's a couple grams. This takes 35 minutes. I don't have a rice cooker, pressure cooker. But yeah, you'll wanna follow the bag directions. Some grains are parboiled too. So like if you buy barley, that will take about 15 minutes to cook if it's parboiled. If it's not, it'll take longer. So make sure you follow your bag. But yeah, if you buy it in bulk, usually got a good 30 minutes. Yeah, awesome. I'm glad people are freezing grains. Yep, you can do quinoa. Farro is another one. And then yeah, the pre-cooked grain packets, I've dumped those in a soup as well. You're going to get a little sodium added with that, but the convenience is really nice. Okay, so from here, we're going to add, you could probably notice I haven't added any salt yet. I always add that at the very end if it's needed, and a lot of times it's not. Oh, I missed the garlic, but I'm just going to skip it. That's okay. I'm just going to add this on the chicken as a garlic rosemary, so I'm good with that. You guys saw the garlic in the other one. I'm going to move along. So I'm going to add that chicken. I'm going to add my rice, which has formed into a cone, and my stock. All right, so I think this was 4 cups. Where are we at? Yeah, okay. So another big one. Yeah, I'm planning on freezing soup. I'm gonna have a lot of soup after this is done. So adding the broth right there, and if you are running short on broth, you can do half and half water and kind of fill out those flavors with dried herbs, ground spices. We just need liquid, right? So if you kind of want to experiment with water a little bit, that's just fine. So I probably will have to let that go so the veggies cook all the way through. I'm going to give, let's see, what are we going to go over? Oh, the immersion blender. So I'm going to give this just a little bit of time because I'm rushing these for our time's sake. Let's see. Let's check the lentils, I guess. Oh, you guys, I never turned the pot on. Okay, now our lentils are cooking. All right, so I'm not going to be able to show you that. Go figure, right? So with that lentil soup, had it been cooking for 20 minutes, they would be soft enough to blend. So that's one of the ways that you can make your soup kind of a little bit more, you know, creamy or smooth, whatever you want to call it, by blending some of it. So in the recipe, it goes over, but you can either take some of it out, put it into a blender and actually blend it, then dump it back in. Or this is one of the tools that I like to have on hand, is an immersion blender. So this is a $30 tool. We'll get to the kale. Yes, thank you. This is a $30 tool. I mean, they are a little, I don't know, they're on the delicate side. I think this is my second one in 15 years, but it's got these different attachments. So will blend right there. When you use it, make sure you submerge all of these holes because it will splatter, but this will blend half the soup or all of it if you wanted to right in the pan. So when you're looking at the recipe of the pureed vegetable soup, I don't ever take it out of the pan. Just once the veggies are cooked, stick this in, turn it on, and you're good to go. So that's kind of a nice way, you know, nice thing to do. This will also make, you can do a smoothie. You can, I've made an avocado cream, made a cashew sauce with it. So it's really versatile. It also comes with a little mini food processor and a whisk. Like if you were doing a meringue, I've never done one, but I would imagine that's what you would use it for. I'm a horrible baker. So I usually do the immersion blender. So this is what I will use once those lentils are cooked. I apologize, I didn't turn when I moved the pot, I didn't turn the flame on, so that's what I get for chatting. Okay, so when do we add the kale? Very good question, and I'm going to clean up my board so I can get my kale over here. We would have remembered it eventually. This is not the way you're supposed to clean your board. A chef will yell at you for doing that with your knife, because it is not good for them, but I continue to do it. Okay, over here. This is another one of my favorite kitchen tools. Let's see. Get to the questions here. So I'm going to go over this, and then I'll read the couple questions that we've got going. This is an over-the-sink strainer. Oh, there you go. It has extendable arms. This is a wonderful kitchen tool because you can fit so much into it. So when I bulk cook quinoa, it's all going in here to let it cool. I also like it because, have you ever dumped something into your colander that's sitting in your sink and it tips over, right? So that is not a risk. You also, if you're cooking and busy in the kitchen, you don't have to clean out your sink in order to use this. So multiple ways that it is a benefit in the kitchen if you are in the market for a new strainer. We are going to take some kale. All I did with this so far is took the ribs off of it. So with kale, some people will say, you know, chop it, or, you know, de-stem it with a knife. To me, that's a little bit of a waste of time because you can hold I should have saved one, I'm sorry. You can hold the end of that stem and just pull the leaves off, and then you're holding the rib in your hand. So instead of flattening it out and using a knife, just tear those greens right off the stem. That works just fine. Again, this looks really, you know, unprofessional, but I just wad it up like this in a big old ball and then hold it tight. So that was all that kale is. Now I'm just squishing it all together. Okay, and I'm going to take thin slices off with my knife, and really watch your fingers on this one. Kind of inch them back, collect it there. The reason I do this first and then go through this way, because I do not like a soup where you're trying to eat it with a spoon and then it's got a 4-inch piece of kale hanging off of it. Greens are wonderful, but we don't need to deal with that at the dinner table. So that is kind of a nicer way to get some more bite-sized bits of greens. Okay, kale can take 5 minutes. So once your soup is all done, really our lentils are going to be almost cooked. We're going to hit it with the, which they probably won't be cooked by 1, but we would hit it with the immersion blender, then add this, because we wouldn't want the kale to be all chopped up in there. That can wilt for about 5 minutes. If you're using spinach, you really want to only stir that in for maybe 2 minutes. If it's an even hardier green than kale, like collard greens, turnip greens, mustard greens, those you could let go for, 8 minutes or so, and really kind of let those cook down. They are more like broccoli versus spinach or like a romaine lettuce. You can add arugula to soups as well, but that's a little bit more of a bitter flavor. So you want to make sure, like, you might put that in the lentil soup. That's spicy enough with enough flavor to match that arugula. Okay, so what can you exchange in a corn or potato chowder recipe for heavy cream? Very good question. So yeah, you could do the white bean slurry if you wanted to go completely, dairy-free and not do that heavy cream at all, because that's going to give you that silkier texture, because that's what heavy cream does, right? It turns that soup into kind of that silky, creamy soup texture. So the white beans would do that. And I would also, on that one, reduce the liquid a little bit and then puree some of it with, or all of it really, but puree with the immersion blender. If it's still too thin, you could do that slurry with, a little almond milk and cornstarch and whip that up, not too thin. I think mine is almost a little bit too thin, but it's actually thickening up now. I usually don't do it that early either. I usually do it right away, then pour it in. But if you do a little bit of a cornstarch slurry, that would thicken it up even more. Because I've noticed when you just add almond milk, it makes it white, but it doesn't give it that silky, creamy soup texture like you would get at a restaurant. So you have to thicken it somehow with something that's going to make it creamy. So hopefully that helps. Let's see where these are. I might have kind of ruined the last part because I can't blend lentils that aren't cooked. So let's see. No, it's not even boiling. Well, I can post a picture when it's done. So that's kind of kicking. Okay, so, oh yeah, cauliflower is a good idea. Yeah, you could do that. If you have leftover riced cauliflower, blend that up with a little almond milk. And you can add, you know, garlic. You could add your dried herbs and make that more flavorful so it doesn't taste quite, you know, so like we talk about depth of flavor, right? So that's kind of where that would come in. Oh yeah, or a daikon radish. Yep, you could do that, or rutabaga. You could do turnips. So yeah, just kind of anything that's going to kind of thicken it up, blend it, and see what happens. Okay, let me see if I went through all the points. I might just show you the kale in the chicken and rice soup for the sake of showing you. And then I will have to skip the lentil blending, which is a bummer, and I'm very sorry. Okay, so this is where I want to lift you up. So I literally just take all this kale and dump it in. And this is one where, you know, kale, even if the soup doesn't call for it, it really does well with any kind of herb-based soup, or, you know, like a French provincial type of flavoring. Goes well, but I'm going to put it right in the lentil soup too. So right now, I wish you could see, it's all, see it right there? It's all sitting on top, and I'm just going to, thank you. I'm going to just kind of stir it down, and it wilts really nicely. So I'll get this going. So this one is, like I said, really thick, so I'll probably add a little water to this one. Give it a couple more stirs. Yeah, so even just at 30 seconds, look at how that has changed. You know, so that looked like a ton of kale on top. It was probably 4 cups, and the soup just kind of accepts it. And so that's a great way to add your leafy greens. I actually have spinach that needs to go before this kale, so I might put the spinach in the lentil soup instead. Yeah, so in reality, I probably would have thickened this. Well, I'm just going to add it now. We're just going all out of, you guys are going to see how actually flexible soups are. So add that slurry. Yeah, and this is one where it originally does call for that half and half. If I'm going to thin it out a little more, I might just do a little almond milk and then see where it's at as far as garlic goes, since I didn't add it. But yeah, now we're looking. I'm just going to unplug you. So yeah, that's where we're at now. Once I add a little almond milk and let that cook down, it's going to be even thicker and just kind of be a really hearty soup. So other questions. Looks like, let's see. Oh yeah, small amount of cream cheese. Yeah, depending on the soup too, you can use Greek yogurt. I've done that with a corn chowder. I've done it with like I said, coconut curry. Yogurt takes that on really nicely. So if you want it to be creamier there, yeah, a little cream cheese, Greek yogurt, those will all work. Okay, cool. I know, I'm hungry too. I'm gonna eat soup. So did I miss any questions? I don't think so. Well, I really thank you all for joining. If you do want to watch this back, I'm going to try to post it on our Fitness Amway website, so it's available through YouTube, but the video should come into the chat when it's done processing. As always, reach out to us, Wendy and myself, if you want help with your individual meal plan.